morning, everyone. Happy Sabbath.
Who am I that the highest King would welcome me? I was lost, but He brought me in. Oh, His love for me. Oh, His love for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. Free at last, He has ransomed me. His grace runs deep. While I was a slave to sin, Jesus died for me. Yes, He died for me. Who the Son sets free, oh, is free indeed. I'm a child of God, yes I am. In my Father's house, there's a place for
so much. All right. Good morning, everybody. How are you today? Jared, you guys are so good. Look at that. That's been. I'm great. Thank you for asking. We're really excited to have you here today. Special day here at Paradox. But before we get into all of that, I like for you to meet somebody around you. Just take a few seconds and say hello. And today's question, if you choose to accept it, I just watched Mission Impossible. It's fine. It's a whole thing. Is what was your favorite birthday or anniversary experience that you can remember? On your mark, get set, go. I know. It's a serious day. What is it? What do you got? Birthday, anniversary. I mean, I don't. Do you guys have anniversaries? I don't know. 16. In your room? That's cool, man. I bought myself some cake. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, I know, right? A little alone time. That's nice. What'd you get? A lightsaber? I've never seen Star Wars. Let's all calm down, okay? Let's take it easy, Judge. It's embarrassing, bro. Tonight.
Yeah, just watch all of them.
I can't handle it. All right. What do we have out there? Up here we had a gift of a lightsaber, which is cool. Then I told him I've never seen Star Wars, and I was judged in church. It's fine. Don't worry about it. How about you guys? Favorite memory? Somebody want to share theirs? No? That's cool. Disneyland. Was that my wife? No? All right. I was just making sure. I don't know. It is what it is. I've shocked people now that I have a Disneyland pass, and people know how I feel about Disneyland. It's not my thing. It's better with a pass, though. I will tell you that. All right, so here's what we're going to do today, you guys. Typically, we play a game. We have whiteboards. People come up here. They write down numbers, and I thought, no more. I want to... I don't know about that. But I would like to see everyone involved in this game. How many people have played online trivia things like HQ or those types of things, right? Exactly. So that's what we're going to do today, except we're not going to use our phones yet. It's coming, though. But today we're just going to use our hands like it's the 1900s, right? It's fine. It's totally fine. So we're going to vote. Everything that I'm going to ask today is It's an anniversary or birthday type question, and it all has number answers. I'm going to count to 3. You guys are going to shoot your hands up with the numbers, and it's an honor system, right? We're in church, people. Okay, right? And we're just going to see who the last person standing is or how many people are there after the 8 questions that I wrote down. Make sense? Following me? All right, here we go. I started with an that's not fair. Don't say easy one, because then people who miss it feel bad, right? That's not true. It's not an easy one, but it's a nice example. So, this year marks the 25th anniversary of a very popular TV show called Friends. I know, I'm excited too. Do you guys even know what that is? Okay, I didn't know. Listen, it's just a thing. I used to be a college recruiter, and eventually people were like, what's Friends? And I thought, I'm done. That's it. How many seasons did Friends run? Put your hands down. Not yet. I'm going to count to 3. I'm going to count to 3, so I'll give you a few seconds to think about it. How many seasons did Friends run for? Okay, think about it. And 1, 2, 3. Show them. The answer is 10. The answer is 10. And fun fact, ladies and gentlemen, Craig Hadley's out. He's done. So, also, part of this honor rule system is when I ask double-digit type answer things, this could be 15 or 51, and if you have to do 7s and 9s, just whatever. Just put your hands in the air. I don't even care. Here we go. All right, 2019, that's this year, by the way, marks what anniversary of Woodstock? Put your hands down, Colin. All right, 1, 2, 3, show them. It is 50. It is the 50th anniversary of Woodstock. Out of curiosity, how many people are still in? This is not a number question. 3? We have 3. Well, that hurt me. We're not going to get to 8, that's for sure. That's all right. Here we go. Let's keep going. What year did the Brady Bunch debut? 1960 what? 1960 what? On your mark, get set, show them. It is 1969. It's also the 50th anniversary of the Brady Bunch. Woodstock and the Brady Bunch, same year. Fascinating, no? Is there anybody in? There's not a single person. All right, reset. We'll play the rest of them. I did 3 questions. They were too hard. It was too hard. All right, here we go. Everybody back in. Are you ready? Because I know you're going to know this one. The Backstreet Boys had a huge hit called I Want It That Way. I know. Get pumped. It was released 20 years ago. How many countries did it reach number 1 in? On your mark, set, go. Dude, you nailed it. It's 25. It's 25. Colin wins. That was amazing, dude. That was amazing. Or that was 52. Those were 2 answers. It could have been that. All right, we'll do a couple more. You ready? Also 20 years ago, Bruce Willis and Haley Joel Osment, that's spelled with a T, by the way, I never knew, starred in a movie. Would you put your hands down? I know you do. Started in a movie titled This Number Sense. Boom, put them up, everyone. Right? You nailed it. You're right. It's The Sixth Sense. How many Academy Award nominations did The Sixth Sense receive? Show them to me. It's 6. How fun is that? Right? That's awesome. All right, just 2 more questions. Here we go. The longest running American sitcom ever is The Simpsons. That's right. In December of this year, how many years will The Simpsons be celebrating? On your mark, get set, show them. It is, in fact, 30. That is right. That is absolutely right. That is a long-running cartoon. All right. Facebook turns 15 this year, or this month, actually, here in February. According to the most recent report, how many active monthly users do they have in billions? Okay? Monthly active users means they've logged in within the last 30 days. So how many billions of the people are there? On your mark, Gazette, show them. It's 2. It's 2.32 billion. I know, you nailed it, man, and then you changed it. It is what it is. I think Colin's the overall winner today. Give him a round of applause. He nailed that, man. That was fantastic. And then just the very last one, very special day today, because today marks an anniversary for Paradox. How many years is it, ladies and gentlemen? That's right. 3. We're all winners, really, right? That's what it is. Well, I just want to say thank you all so much for everything you do for us here at Paradox.
I was just going to say, Wednesday was our 3-year anniversary, and I just want to show a few pictures because that's what I do whenever we're together. So we started on February 20 in 2016 at the Mission Gables Bowl House. This was from the first service of Paradox. Just out of curiosity, who was at the first service of Paradox? Look at that. We haven't offended you yet. The time is coming, everyone. We're just glad that you made it. So here's a group picture also. From there, we moved up to the Carriage House in August of 2016. And how many of you guys attended a service at the Carriage House? Yeah, still got a good following. And then in December, we arrived here at the Mission, and we've been here since then. We've been celebrating Easter at the Appleton Ranch, which I just got confirmation this week that we'll be doing again, so it should be fun. I know, right? If you have not been, we do a sunrise service where we welcome the sun. Last year, we forgot to bring the sun. I'm hoping it will show up this year. Also, a highlight from last year was we had 2 baptisms for Dina and Denise Sanker, and it was just phenomenal to have them part of the body of Christ. We also welcomed some phenomenal guest speakers, including the one and only Lisa Gungor, as well as Peter Rollins. They spoke here last year, and it was inspiring. And one of my favorite highlights from last year was our Disney concert in downtown Redlands. Yeah, I know, give it up for Disney. That's like 3 things. I feel like we should be getting paid by them by now. Our kids ministry has done phenomenal things, and I've just been so grateful for all that they've done here at the church. This is them singing one of their songs. And then another highlight was Paradox Youth went up to winter camp, and it was just a great retreat that they got to spend up in Forest Home. And probably I can say this with certainty, my favorite highlight from this past year was when the elders read the inclusion and affirmation statement of LGBT persons, where we publicly said that we will not discriminate whether it comes to hiring or same-sex marriage, that we believe that every person is made in the image of God, and that does not exclude LGBT persons. So thank you so much for being part of this church the past 3 years. It is a privilege to be your pastor, and I'm so glad that we get to worship together again. It's a gift every week that we have together. At this time, we invite you to continue to sing and worship with us. We are going to sing a song of praise to celebrate what has been good in our lives this past week, and then a song of lament to talk about what has happened that has not been as good. So at this time, we ask you to worship with us.
Time's beginning, you gave your love freely, withholding nothing, Jesus, my Jesus. You carried the weight of the world on your shoulders. You stopped at nothing to prove you were for us. Jesus, my Jesus. It's extravagant, it doesn't make sense, we'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable, only heaven knows just how far you go to say you love us. You don't belittle our pain and our suffering. You comfort us in our greatest unraveling. Jesus, my Jesus. You are the dawn that is breaking within me. You are the sun that is rising around me. Jesus, my Jesus. It's extravagant, it doesn't make sense, we'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable, only heaven knows just how far you go to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us. Here is all my love, it's yours, no conditions. When you pull me close, no, I won't resist it. Here is all my love, it's yours, no conditions. When you pull me close, no, I won't resist it. Here is all my love, it's yours, no conditions. When you pull me close, no, I won't resist it. Here is all my love. It doesn't make sense, we'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable, only heaven knows just how far you go to say you love us. It's extravagant, it doesn't make sense, we'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable, only heaven knows just how far you go to say you love us, to say you love us, to say you love us. It's extravagant, it doesn't make sense, we'll never comprehend the way you love us. It's unthinkable, only heaven knows just how far you go to say you love us. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Oh, a long way back home. World, I feel is so lonely and cold. This world is so lonely and cold. This world I feel is so lonely and cold. I guess I'll go back home. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child. Alone way back home. Why did I leave the ones that love me? Why did I leave the ones that love me? I guess I'll pray for the one above me to show me the way back home, to show me the way back home.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful Sabbath day. Be with us as we listen to what Pastor Craig has to teach us today. And please help us to have a good week. And in your name pray, amen.
Thank you so much for singing with us. At this time, I'd like to invite our children's ministry to go to the back with Teacher Madeline and Teacher Ashley. There's some crafts and games and a lesson as well. And the kids can go back at this time during the sermon. Also, we have a video feed directly to my left of the live service, if that's easier for you and your children. And we're just so grateful that you're here. If that's easier, great. Of course, you're welcome to stay here with your kids as well. Quick announcement. Next week, we are inviting the one and only Tyler Fullerton here to Paradox. And atheists. Okay. So Tyler is an atheist friend of mine. He's my best friend from college. And you've heard me talk about stories here often with Tyler. But he's coming to speak here at Paradox, and I want to be very clear as to the reason why we're doing this. For the month of March, we are studying the book of Ecclesiastes. And the book of Ecclesiastes is the story of losing faith. And so Tyler, who grew up in the church, lost faith, and he walked away from the faith. And so to frame the discussion for the book of Ecclesiastes, to enrich it and bring humanity to the story, we're going to have Tyler share his story. I'm going to interview him, and he'll be here next week. We just want to give you a heads up. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask, but I don't want you to invite a friend not knowing that, and then you show up and you're like, well, this is different. So Tyler will be here next week. You'll probably invite more friends because you'll be like, oh, Craig's not speaking. Great. And so Tyler will be here, and we'd love for you to join us as we start our series in the book of Ecclesiastes. At this time, though, I'd like to invite you to turn in your Bibles to the book of Numbers, the fourth book of the Bible. We're going to be in chapter 27. Now, I have to give a quick disclaimer. We're going to get to that book eventually. It's at the end of this sermon that I'm going to talk about that story. So if we're neck deep into another story and you're thinking to yourself, are we going to talk about the Bible? I promise you we will. It's just going to come in at the end of this sermon. So I came across a story recently that I had to share with you guys this morning because it illustrates perfectly what happens in Numbers 27 and puts some real context onto what that story must have been like. This story is told by a woman. I heard it told by a woman named Erica Armstrong Dunbar, and she wrote a book about this, which I'll tell you about in a few minutes. But the story that she tells us revolves around a woman who was born around June 1773. This woman's name was Ona Marie Judge. And Ona Marie Judge was born in Virginia on a plantation known as Mount Vernon. Yes, she was born into the slave-holding property of George Washington. Now, not many people talk about George Washington owning slaves, but by the time he died, he owned over 300 slaves on 5 different properties. And one of these slaves was a woman that was born in 1773 into the property and into the estate that George Washington oversaw, and that was Ona Judge. Here's a painting of George Washington marrying a woman named Martha Custis, and that would eventually become the first lady of the United States of America. And Ona Judge technically belonged to her, and as Ona Judge grew up, Martha took a liking to her and made her her personal assistant slave, and that is how the story unfolds. Now, before we get to the life of Ona Judge, we have to talk about what's going on in America, because on July 4, 1776, a bunch of people got together and declared our independence from England. Woo! Okay, so everyone's like, America, maybe? Okay, so George Washington wasn't there. You know why? He was fighting battles. So I can imagine him getting word that they've declared their independence, and he thinks to himself, so what? We're still out here fighting war with Britain. Now, what happens shortly after the Declaration of Independence is a bunch of Quakers get together in the state of Pennsylvania, and they decide that slavery is in fact evil. And so they decide in 1780, they write this document called an Act for the Gradual Abolition of Slavery, and they declare it illegal to own slaves in the state of Pennsylvania. This is the first state to abolish slavery in their borders. Now, it was possible to bring your slaves through if you were passing through to other slave-holding states, but they had kind of clauses and ways to get around that in order to understand that you cannot own slaves long-term in Pennsylvania. Shortly after this, General George Cornwallis meets George Washington as well as Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette and Hercules Mulligan at the Battle of Yorktown. How do I know all those names? Because I saw Hamilton. That's the only reason. They all meet at the Battle of Yorktown. The world turns upside down. Yeah, I don't sing quite as well as they do, but I'm still excited about it. And the British surrender to the Americans. Okay, all right, yeah, okay, somebody. And we become a sovereign nation. Now, it takes about 6 years to set up a government, apparently, and there was a group of politicians that met about 6 years after this in Philadelphia. George Washington was one of them this time. And this is where they signed the Constitution into being. A few years later then, they have their first presidential election. And wouldn't you know it, on February 4, 1789, George Washington is unanimously selected as the first president of the United States of America. Man, does that seem like a long time ago, when we all just agreed on who the president should be. So, in February 4, 1789, George Washington is brought then, he moves from Mount Vernon in Virginia all the way up to New York City, which is where the capital was in 1789. He and Martha Washington bring with them 7 slaves, one of which is Ona Judge. Now, you can imagine living in this woman's perspective, you can start to see all these new things, and you move from the countryside up to one of the thriving cities of American culture, and you start to see and hear brand new ideas and thoughts, and you interact with free black Americans in New York. Now, at this time, New York still allowed slavery and legalized slavery because it was a status symbol, but here, Ona Judge begins to hear and interact with people who think differently than what she's heard before. A few months later, after George Washington moves to New York, he is sworn in as the first president of the United States of America. And then about a year and a half later, the Great Compromise of 1790 happens, which is just the worst name you could possibly imagine. So Lin-Manuel Miranda renamed this compromise as the room where it happens, right? And it's here that they took on state debts, the national government took on state debts in exchange to move the capital south to a place next to Virginia that will become Washington, D.C. Now, in the interim, though, there were no buildings in Washington, D.C. So what they had to do was they had to move the capital south for 10 years to Philadelphia, and it's here that the President of the United States had to move from New York down to Philadelphia and lived in this location that has a memorial at it now, where the President used to live. So, the capital was in Philadelphia for 10 years. George Washington and Martha Washington brought with them 9 of their slaves to Pennsylvania. This is a big problem because Pennsylvania has the Act for the Gradual Abolition of Slavery. And what the rules were, what the law was at this time in 1790, was that if any slave was in Pennsylvania for 6 months, they would be granted their emancipation. So, George and Martha Washington moved to Pennsylvania. They bring 9 slaves with them, one of which is Ona Judge. And they're living there for a couple of months when all of a sudden the first Attorney General of the United States, Edmund Randolph, shows up at their door and says, I need to talk to Mrs. Washington. Mrs. Washington sits down with Edmund Randolph, the person who makes the laws of the United States of America, and he says, can you dismiss your slaves? And so she dismissed the slaves, and he says, I've got to talk to you about something. If your slaves stay here for 6 months in a row, they're free. And Martha Washington said, no. And he said, yes. And Martha Washington said, well, my slaves would never leave me. They're good slaves. They're loyal to me. They wouldn't want anything outside of this walls that I've prepared for them or given to them. These slaves will remain loyal to me. And Edmund Randolph said, I used to think the same thing. But I had 3 slaves who lived with me here in Philadelphia, and they began to quote the law of Philadelphia back on me, and they declared their emancipation. And Martha Washington said, no, and he said, yes. And the way that Erica Dunbar tells this story, she writes these words, Randolph never believed that his slaves would quote the law of Pennsylvania back to him. This is the Attorney General of the United States of America, everyone. And he's shocked that people want to follow the laws. And so he says to Martha Washington, he says, you've got to get your slaves out of here before 6 months happens. Otherwise, they may declare their independence. Martha Washington says, this is troubling news. I must speak to my husband about this. So she speaks to his husband, and we don't know what that conversation was like, but we do know that George Washington wrote a letter to his secretary, a man named Tobias Lear. And in that letter, he wrote these words about what happened in this proposed idea that he had to move his slaves out of the state within 6 months. In that letter, he wrote these words, for although I do not think they, being the slaves, would be benefited by the change, yet the idea of freedom might be too great a temptation for them to resist. We can't just let them decide. They may choose wrong here and choose their own freedom. That might be too tempting for them. And so George Washington, for the entire time he was in Philadelphia, 7 years, rotated his slaves every 6 months, including Ona Judge, from Philadelphia to Mount Vernon and back. He documented meticulously that these slaves were crossing state lines because he was trying to make sure that they all of a sudden weren't free people. Not only that, but shortly after he was elected to his second term, George Washington, the most powerful man in the United States of America, signed into law the Fugitive Slave Act, which says that if any slave escapes from the South and makes it to an abolitionist state, they are not free. They are still the property of the slave owners in the slave-holding states. So you can see that George Washington might be a bit biased when he signs this law into act. So Ona Judge is living in Philadelphia for years at this point. She is going back and forth between there and Mount Vernon every 6 months. They are documenting this. She is aware that they are doing this for a very specific reason. Not only that, but in Philadelphia, Philadelphia has the biggest population of free black Americans. And so she regularly sees them and interacts with them and hears about what freedom is like. So she goes through these motions years after years after years. She lives as a slave. She doesn't get paid for her wages. She doesn't have her freedom. And eventually, Martha Washington, after years, pulls her in and says, I have something to tell you. I've decided, Ona Judge, I've decided to gift you as a wedding present to my granddaughter, Eliza Custis. Now, Ona Judge does not know Eliza Custis, but this is a very scary time in a slave's life. After all, they don't know if the next slave owner will be a cruel slave owner. They don't know who this slave owner is marrying. They don't know anything about what this life might behold before them. So you can imagine this is a very frightening piece of news, let alone the dehumanizing idea of gifting someone else as a wedding present. So Ona Judge hears all of this, and she hears that the wedding date is March 21, 1796. And the next time she goes back to Mount Vernon, she will no longer be the property of Martha Washington, but she will be the property of Eliza Custis. And it's here that Ona Judge decides it's time to make a move. And on May 21 of 1796, the Washingtons were having an extravagant, big dinner party. There were lots of people around at their mansion in Philadelphia when all of a sudden, Ona Judge stepped out, walked toward the harbor, and boarded a ship that was headed out to sea. Now, we don't know exactly what happened next, but 3 days after this, the Washingtons took out an ad in the Philadelphia Gazette and said, we are missing a slave. We will give a $10 reward for anyone who can find her. What they did not know was that Ona Judge was on a boat all the way to Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And when she made it all the way to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, sometime in August of 1796, all the way to the north, far away from where the Washingtons were, and all of a sudden, Ona Judge, as a 22-year-old, is living as a free woman, a fugitive free woman, but a free woman for the first time in her life at 22. Then, the unthinkable happens. As she is walking down the streets, she comes across a woman named Elizabeth Langdon. Now, Elizabeth Langdon was she was 14 when she first visited the Washingtons because her father was a senator in New Hampshire. And so she once accompanied her father all the way down to the Washingtons mansion in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. And when she got there, there's this 14-year-old who was being served by someone who was similar age to her. And so 4 years later, John Langdon's daughter, Elizabeth Langdon, sees Ona Judge in the middle of downtown Portsmouth and recognizes her. She says, what are you doing here? How'd you end up in Portsmouth? You seem like you're a long ways away from the Washingtons. And all of a sudden, she tells her dad that she saw the Washington slave, and John Langdon says, I think that she must have run away. So the senator from New Hampshire writes all the way back to Philadelphia, back to George Washington, saying, I think we may have a runaway slave with us here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. George Washington receives this word, and he is greatly distressed. Why would Ona Judge run away, he thought. So he came up with a story to make himself feel better, because he really believed that he was a benevolent slave owner. There was ethics in slaveholding in George Washington's mind, and he followed all the proper etiquette. He took care of his slaves in his mind, and he was one of the good guys that practiced slaveholding, right? So his narrative that he came up with was, well, she clearly ran off with a Frenchman. And the only reason she would leave is because she wanted to fall in love with a Frenchman, and you can't legally marry as a slave, so she must have wanted to marry this guy, so she must have run off with this guy. So George Washington goes to his Secretary of the Treasury, a man named Oliver Wolcott Jr., and says, can you go get my slave? Because apparently if you need slave catching done, you go to your accountant. Not sure why that is. Oliver Wolcott Jr. says, yes, Mr. President, right away, sir. Oliver Wolcott then goes to the customs officer of Portsmouth, New Hampshire, a man named Joseph Whipple, and says, can you go find this woman and bring her back to the Washingtons? Joseph Whipple, of course, being a customs officer, wants to make the President of the United States happy. So he goes to, he's in Portsmouth, and he's thinking to himself, how can I get Ona Judge to come to me? Because that will look much better. So he puts out an ad and says, I need a woman who is willing to do domestic housework around our house. Please apply at our residence, and we will interview you. So Ona Judge sees this ad. She takes up on it. She goes to the house of Joseph Whipple, and she sits down with him, and she says that she really was confused by the questions he was asking. Because he was asking all sorts of questions about her background and where she came from. And then she said, I knew he was an agent for George Washington the minute he asked, have you ever fallen in love with someone from France? And she's like, something is not right here. And she even called him on it, and he said, you're right. I was sent by George Washington to bring you home. And Joseph Whipple believed that if he could just reason with Ona Judge, that she would get back on a boat and go back to Mount Vernon and live her life as a happy slave, because the Washingtons are good people in Joseph Whipple's mind, and they'll take care of her. So after reasoning with her some times, Ona Judge says, you're right, I'll go back. He says, great, we're gonna board a boat in 3 days. I'll meet you at the harbor. We'll go down there together, and I'll deliver you back. I'll even tell the Washingtons to be kind to you. She says, oh, thank you so much. So she decides she's going back to Mount Vernon. We're going back. So Joseph Whipple's like, great, I'll meet you in 3 days at the harbor. 3 days come and go. They pass through these 3 days, and then all of a sudden, Joseph Whipple shows up at the harbor, and he waits. And he waits. And he waits. And all of a sudden, it dawns on Joseph Whipple, I don't think she's coming back. And he's like, what do? I do not want to use force, because there's a lot of people in Portsmouth, New Hampshire who are sympathetic to slaves. It's really controversial here. I don't want to make a scene. So at the same time, I want to make the president happy. What do I do here? And so he decides on November 28, 1796, to write a letter to George Washington saying, I don't think she wants to come back. George Washington was furious. In that letter, he even proposed, Joseph Whipple proposed to George Washington, why don't you offer her, like if she comes back, you'll let her be free? Or that when you die, then she will become free. Something like that. George Washington wrote back to Joseph Whipple with these words, to enter into such a compromise with her is totally inadmissible. George Washington is furious that this woman continually defies him. Now, here's what happens just a few months after this letter. We can find in the New Hampshire Gazette a wedding announcement of a Miss Ona Judge to a Mr. John Staines, who was a black sailor. This is a big deal, because to be a slave, you could not be married. And here is a woman, 22 years old, now 24, who has somehow, someway found her way all the way from Mount Vernon, overcome the odds, defied a president, and found love. Wow. But the story's not over. Because after George Washington steps down, he does not take his third term because he's not a dictator. He goes back to Mount Vernon, and sometime around July 1799, he says to himself, I want to get my slave back. I'm just mad that she's out there free. I'm retired, and I'm not happy. So he goes to his nephew, a man named Burwell Bassett, which is a phenomenal villain name. And he says, Burwell, I want you to go to Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and pick up my slave and bring her back. Burwell, the nephew, says, sure, George Washington, I'll go to Portsmouth. So he goes to Portsmouth all the way in July 1799. Ona Judge is about 26 years old here. And he knows where Ona Judge is because this story with Joseph Whipple was very famous. So, Burwell Bassett goes to the door of Ona Judge and says, okay, I'm just gonna knock on the door, I'm gonna reason with her, and she'll come back. So he knocks on the door, And Ona Judge opens the door, and she recognizes the nephew of the former president of the United States of America. He says, it's time to come home. It's time to come back. The Washingtons miss you. How do you think your actions have made them feel? He goes on to say things like this. Look, you will not face any retaliation if you return to Mount Vernon. You can come back, and the Washingtons will be fine with you. They'll just let you come back into life, and they'll reintegrate you. He even makes another deal. He says, look, the Washingtons will set you free when you return. Now, here's a question I'd like to ask for you, and I'd like for us to pause in this story for a little bit. What should Ona Judge do? Remember that Ona Judge is a Christian, and Christians have a responsibility to be good, upstanding people, right? And it's here that she has her faith, she has her life, she has her freedom, but she is a fugitive, and she's thinking to herself, what is it that I do? What is the most morally responsible thing for her to do? It's here at this point in the story, and I promise we will finish this in a minute, that we have to talk about Zelophehad. Let me hear you say Zelophehad. Yeah, it's a great name. It's a great name. It's in the Bible in Numbers 27. And Zelophehad had 5 daughters. The 5 daughters were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tisra. And what happens is Zelophehad died, and he had no sons. And so these 5 women, Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, Tisra, get together and they say, our father has died with no heir. What are we going to do? And they look at each other and they say, we have to do something because we will not let the memory and the honor of our father die. So the 5 of these sisters go before the most powerful person in their government, Moses, the head of the state, and they make their case for why they should be able to inherit and own the property that their father once owned. The words they use are this: our father died in the wilderness. This is to Moses. They say he was not among the company of those who gathered themselves together against the Lord in the company of Korah, but died for his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be taken away from his clan because he had no son? Give to us a possession among our father's brothers. We want to own property, Moses. Look, I know there's a rule that women can't own property. This is 1500 BCE. Can you change the rules and make it so that women can own property? Because this is an injustice. We read in the next verse, Moses brought their case before the Lord. And here's where God shows up. And God hears the case of the daughters of Zelophehad. God looks at Moses, and God's response is this. Oh, hold on, there we go. The daughters of Zelophehad are right in what they are saying. God goes on to say, you shall indeed let them possess an inheritance among their father's brothers and pass the inheritance of their father on to them. Yes. It's like a half clap, like, is he about to throw, yeah, okay, well. I think people aren't clapping because they've been with us in the series of Numbers. So they're like, are there birds coming or something? God then goes on to explain a few things. God says, look, if there's no sons and no daughters, this is what happens. But then God circles back and says, this is to be a statute and ordinance as the Lord commanded Moses. Women can own property. Now it's here that we should give a raucous round of applause, right? Yeah. My brothers and sisters, the story of the daughters of Zelophehad is incredible. It is incredible, and there are 3 reasons why. Let's start with the great author, Rachel Held Evans, who was the person who introduced me to this story last summer. She writes in her book, Inspired, which is a fantastic book talking about the inspiration of Scripture. She writes these words. She says, the daughters of Zelophehad successfully lobbied the leaders of Israel for the right for women to own property. This is fascinating because I know what it's like to be a person living in 2019 reading the Bible. We often dismiss the Bible and think to ourselves, it's so primitive, so archaic, so old school, so barbaric. Why can't they be more like us civilized selves today? But when you look at American history, the stories of Zelophehad, the daughters of Zelophehad, is a remarkable story. Because in 1769, the colonies adopted the British law that women could not own property or keep any earnings. This is almost 3,000 years after the story of the daughters of Zelophehad. Not only that, but when we look after about 70 or 60 years, 70 years after this, all of a sudden one state kind of woke up and said, hey, maybe we should allow women to own property. So in 1839, women can own property in the state of Mississippi. Mississippi led the way on this. Now, there's an asterisk up there, because if you know anything about American history, you know that women's rights often go to white women first and then sometimes trickle down toward women of color, right? So there's an asterisk here because this applies only to white women in 1839 because, of course, slavery was very much alive and well in Mississippi. But there was this idea that women should, in fact, own property, and it began in Mississippi. In 1848, New York, I skipped one, sorry. In 1848, New York said we can allow women to have separate economies, and it wasn't all the way until 1900 that women could own property in every state in the United States of America. 1900. And what's crazy is when you go back to Numbers 27, God is saying, hey, women can own property. And there's a bunch of Christians later in 1900 saying like, I don't know. I mean, is it clear? Is it really clear? Now, it's easy to look back at this and say, well, Craig, that was 119 years ago. Things have clearly gotten better. Do you hear that groan from the females? No. This one and only woman, Argana von Salas, who's an MD, PhD at the second, what's rated number 2 for med schools in the nation. She works at WashU. It's rated number 2 to Loma Linda University. She was published an article called I Am an Angry Woman, which is a great title. And she published it in the USA Today talking about discrimination that she still faces at the workplace. And this is in a field of science as an MD, PhD. She has gotten every letter she could possibly get behind her name, right? She talks about these words, a study that she oversaw where women job applicants who are self-promoting and express stereotypical masculine traits, such as a desire to lead, are found to be less hireable than men. Men don't like it when women say, I can take initiative, and they avoid their applications. Whew. When we read that in 2000, this was written in 2018, when we read that in 2018, we go back to these 5 women who said, we have a desire to change things, Moses. We'd like to own property. We all of a sudden realize that the daughters of Zelophehad are millenniums ahead of their time. Millenniums. And it all comes from the Bible. The Bible. And in the Bible, there's this story about how women should own property the same as men do. And what's interesting is we look at this book and we have this idea that it's filled with primitive barbaric ideas. And guess what? We talk about primitive barbaric ideas here at Paradox, right? But every now and then you get these stories rubbing shoulders next to these stories that you're like, well, that's pretty progressive. Wow. Really? God said you can own property? And the story, the moral from this, the idea behind this story being incredible is it tells us that when it comes to the Bible, there are stories in the Bible that are morally ahead of our modern practices. And so the Bible has some things to teach us still that we can barely keep up with. And the daughters of Zelophehad is just one of several examples. Which brings us to the incredible nature of this story and the second reason. The reason why I find this story so incredible is because I've never heard it before. I have gone to church school for 30 years. I have gone to church for 30 years. I've gone to church school for less than that. I didn't keep dropping out. I've gone to church school. I've gone to church. I got my master's degree. And then I read a book that Rachel Held Evans says, it's like, we should all talk about the daughters of Zelophehad more. And I said, who? Huh? I had never heard this story. Why is it that we're not talking about this story? Oh, I know why. It's because we only let men preach, huh? Yeah. Woo, you go through church history and you're like, wow, men are really deciding a lot of what the Bible says, huh? And as I grew up, I heard mostly men speaking on these stories. And when you look at this from this perspective, you realize how much the male perspective has shaped the way that we understand scriptures, even though it's wrong. For instance, I have heard over and over and over again in my life that Adam was created before Eve and therefore has some sort of precedence in some weird game in God's eyes. That men are somehow more valuable because God said, I'm going to create men first, and then whatever's left over, I'll create women. That is the dumbest exegesis I could possibly come up with. Because the story of Genesis is that God keeps creating things that are more complex and more beautiful and more wonderful. So you go from birds to fish, then you go from fish to animals, then you go from animals to man, and then man to woman. So if anyone ever says, well, God created Adam first, you say, are we going to bow down to the cows now? Like, what are you talking about? What a terrible translation, interpretation of this story. I've heard men preach about Boaz and how women need to wait for their Boaz. And this all has something to do with their sexual purity, which is just a horrible reading of this story. Because this story is about a woman who says, I want to marry that man. I will propose to him. And then she goes and says, marry me. And he's like, what? She's like, yeah, I'm a woman. I can propose to you. Well, this is progressive for 2019. And it's a story that's lost on people. And what's crazy is men read this story and they say, women, wait. That's the opposite of this story. I've heard men talk about the story of Esther and how Esther won a beauty contest to marry King Ahasuerus. And King Ahasuerus held this beauty contest. They said, see, the Lord used her. Women, dress as beautifully as possible because that's how God uses you. When you go back and actually read the story is not a beauty contest, but instead is a sex contest, where every woman in the contest is required to sleep with King Ahasuerus without their consent, and he picks the one that he likes the best. And you miss that if you allow men to tell the story. I have throughout my life heard about how the Song of Solomon was a book about sex. It's a book about sex. It's really nonsensical. It's just passionate sex. And then you read it, and you realize it's written by a woman. And she hates Solomon because Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And she's the only voice in Scripture to stand up and say, this is wrong. Does no one else see that this is wrong? She points directly at Solomon and says, he can keep his 1,000, I will have my one. And she argues for a marriage, a vision of marriage where man and woman, or man and man, or woman and woman are equal partners in a marriage. When we look at the Bible and what it all represents, I have to tell you that there's some things that are misunderstood. We have allowed men to control the way that this story has been interpreted, and we've just trusted their interpretation without actually looking at it for ourselves. And so, my brothers and sisters, this story tells us that the Bible is filled with stories about God's plan for the equality of women. And the reason there's an asterisk there is because you and I have to go find it. Because the male-dominated pulpit will not find it for you. So the Bible is filled with stories about God's plan for the equality of women. And we need to champion those stories and say, you know what people are heroes? You know what people are great? The daughters of Zelophehad. Which brings us back to the third reason this story is incredible. The third reason this story is incredible is because it's in the book of Numbers. Yeah. I cannot believe this story is in the book of Numbers. Because if you've been with us the last 5 weeks, you know it's been a doozy of a book, right? And in Numbers, just to give you a quick recap, in Numbers 1-3, we read about how God demands to be compensated for murdering Egyptian babies. That's how the book starts. Then in Numbers 5, we read about how God creates a misogynistic and cruel ritual for husbands to determine the fidelity of their wives. Then a few weeks ago, we talked about Numbers 11, where after eating manna for 3 meals a day and over 800 days in a row, the Israelites asked God for some quail meat, and God responds by saying, I will kill them by a bird plague. Then in Numbers 13-14, we read about how the Israelites are frightened because the promised land is filled with militaries of opposing nations. They're not a military, they're ex-slaves. And so they express fear and they say, I don't know if we can win this battle. God becomes so angry that God says, I will kill them all. Then in Numbers 15-16, which we talked about last week, the Israelites protest against Moses because Moses executed a man who picked up sticks on the Sabbath. God sees these people protesting and saying, you shouldn't have killed this man, you have gone too far. And God's response in Numbers is, I will kill 2 families by opening the ground to swallow them. But God isn't done in this story. God then says, I will kill 250 of them by fire. And just when you think the bloodshed can't get any worse, God says, all right, I'm going to kill 14,000 of them by plague. And when we look at this story, there's this stark contrast when all of a sudden these daughters say, we'd like to own land. And God shows up, and if you're like me, you're like, oh no, please tell God to go away. you have not made things better in the book of Numbers. And God loudly declares, I am radically in favor of women's rights. What? Where did that come from? It's there. It's in the Bible. And it's right next to all of those other crazy stories. And you got to read all the crazy stories to get to what's really good here, don't you? And we look at the Bible, and it teaches us about the Bible that the daughters of Zelophehad is the best story in the book of Numbers. If we know any story in the book of Numbers, it should be the daughters of Zelophehad, right? We should be telling our daughters and sons about this story and saying, you know what is the most important takeaway from Numbers? These daughters of Zelophehad. They spoke up when they were being trampled. They said things can be better, and God listened. Which brings us back to this story with the nephew of George Washington staring at George Washington's runaway slave in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And here's Ona Marie Judge trying to figure out, what do I do? What do I do? This is real time. She's trying to think, do I make a scene? Do I run for it? Do I say no? What do I do here? And after seeing the nephew of George Washington look directly at her and saying, you're going back to slavery, she utters one of the greatest lines in American history. She says to him, I am free now and choose to remain so. Yeah, you can get an amen for that one. Burwell Bassett is a Southern white man. He's not used to this. And so he's kind of reeling. So he says, okay, well, clearly I need to use force. I'm going to go get law enforcement. He leaves to go get law enforcement. Ona Judge is not stupid. So she immediately picks up her things and leaves. Burwell Bassett returns to the door, the home of Ona Judge, knocks on the door, there's no response. He kicks the door open, finds that no one is there. Ona Judge has escaped 8 miles north to a place called Greenland, New Hampshire, where she would spend the rest of her life as a free woman. A few months after this, George Washington passed away on December 14, 1799. Several decades after the death of George Washington, Ona Judge passed away on February 25, 1848, at the age of 75. Now, when I see these stories, I see all kinds of parallels. I see all kinds of parallels because Ona Judge is a Christian woman. And as a Christian woman, when she is confronted with a moral quandary of obeying authority or disobeying authority and her own freedom, she says, oh, no, I'm not going back to that. And I would argue it's the most Christian thing she could have possibly done in that moment. And when you look at what she did and what she defied and how she insisted that she was a person of equal value to everyone else living in the United States, she championed this idea that was originated all the way back in the daughters of Zelophehad. This idea that we're valuable. We can own property too. Don't you see this, Moses? And what I find to be so fascinating about the story of the daughters of Zelophehad is they're challenging Moses. Moses, who many people consider to be the great hero of faith, the one who walked with God, who knew God better than anyone else. And I read this story and I say, who knew God better than anyone else? Because I'm pretty sure it's the daughters who possessed a greater understanding of God. They're the ones who say, you know what? This is what matters, Moses, for us to have rights, for us to be taken care of. And we read the stories of Moses throughout Numbers, and he's grumpy, he's cranky, he's angry with people, he's willing to kill people who pick up sticks on Sabbath. And we hold up Moses as a hero and ignore the daughters of Zelophehad. Who possesses a greater understanding of God? I would say in the book of Numbers, it's the daughters of Zelophehad. Which brings us forward 3,000 years. And you contrast these two identities, these two people, Ona Judge and George Washington. Now, before we go any further, I just want to say that George Washington did emancipate his slaves upon his death. He was the only founding father to do so. What was not told to me was that he had a young 22-year-old woman challenging his authority to own slaves for the rest of his life, toward the twilight of his life. And he chose to ignore it. Which raises the question, between George Washington and Ona Judge, who possessed a greater understanding of freedom? Ona Judge does. She understood freedom in ways that George Washington couldn't even imagine. And when we read her story is one of freedom, of emancipation. And what's so frustrating about George Washington is we know that he longed for freedom from the British Empire. And when he longed for that freedom, he didn't see it necessary to pass it on to people who were around him. But Ona Judge got it from the moment she was born, that she was worthy of freedom. She was worthy of owning property. She was worthy of liberty and justice for all. And when I look at these two stories, it is imperative that as a Christian community that we understand one of the paradoxes at the center of our faith. The fact is that those who face the greatest adversity, discrimination, problems, attacks, those who face the greatest adversity understand the work of God the best. Ona Judge was met with racism and sexism at the intersectionality of her race and her gender. And because of that, she understood freedom better than anyone. Now, this is not an excuse to endorse slavery or sexism. It's not to say that this is why it's okay that this happens. It's to show you how unjust it is and remind all of us that there are perspectives of people who have been discriminated against and told that they're not good enough and that they're not worthy of salvation. We as Christians should rush toward those people in droves and trust that they understand the work of God the best. My brothers and sisters, may we have ears to listen and eyes to see the voices of those who are marginalized by society. And may we trust that those who face the greatest adversity understand the work of God the best. May we see and embrace Jesus Christ in all.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. Oh, you say I'm loved when I can't feel a thing. You say I'm strong when I think I am weak. You say I am held when I am falling short and when I don't belong. Oh, you say I am yours, and I believe. Oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe. The only
Amen. At this time, we invite you to reach in the seat back in front of you, and we ask that everybody fills out a connection card. This helps us to identify first and second time guests and express our appreciation that you are here. You can also write a prayer request in the back if you'd like, and we're going to take a minute and fill these out at this time. And at this time, we're going to collect an offering. There are two ways to give. One is online at paradoxgiving.com, and the other is in the bucket that's being passed. You can also put your connection card in there as well. So we are grateful for the generosity you've shown us. And at this time, we invite everyone to stand as we sing together, "This is my mother's world."
This is my mother's world.
Dear God, may we have the courage to see that you speak with those who have faced great adversity. Lord, may you give us the courage and the words to tell the stories of the daughters of Zelophehad and Onijah. And may we see where you move and how you change people's perceptions and who you are in 2019 and beyond. In your name we pray, amen. Thank you so much for joining us. We are just so grateful that you are here. We hope that you have a great rest of your weekend. Take care.